Well, welcome once again to Sakar. As most of you would remember, we completed Gita essays on the Gita part 1 in last August, and after that there was a choice to take up some selected chapters from the synthesis or some selected cantos from Savitri. But I thought it may be a right continuation to take up the synthesis after the Gita, because some of the major concepts of the Bhagavad Gita are taken up in the synthesis of yoga, and Sri Aurobindo expands the same concept or some of the concepts of the Gita. And interestingly, he would add the point of view of integral yoga. So the advantage that we have in the synthesis is that we get both the Bhagavad Gita and the synthesis of yoga. That means the yoga of Sri Aurobindo and the yoga of Sri Krishna. And if you read the synthesis, I would say our own understanding of the Gita increases. It becomes clearer, we get a deeper depth and a clarity which we may miss otherwise when reading directly the Gita. That's why we often say, if you want to read the essays on the Gita, you do read that, but immediately follow it up by a reading of the synthesis. Because as you would see in the synthesis, there are 4 parts. Part 1 is called the Yoga of Divine Works. Part 2, the Yoga of Integral Knowledge. Part 3, the Yoga of Divine Love. And Part 4 is the Yoga of Self-Perfection. So the first 3 parts are closely related to the Bhagavad Gita, but it is Part 4 where we have purely the integral yoga. So in a way we see the Bhagavad Gita in the first 3 parts expanded and seen in the light of integral yoga, and then in the 4th part Sri Aurobindo brings in exclusively the principles of the synthesis. So I thought it is good to take up synthesis now and keep the Savitri for Savitri Bhavan, which I should be commencing from the first week of March. And here too, in this part 1, in the Yoga of Divine Works, I would like to take up the concept of sacrifice, which begins with chapter 4. What I propose to do is cover the main line of argument, development of the concept of sacrifice in chapter 4 and 5. And in chapter 6 we have the ascent of the sacrifice, number 2. Although I have announced that I will be taking up chapter 6 to begin with, I thought it would be better to take up from chapter 4, because 4, 5 and 6 they all deal with the concept of sacrifice. So I felt it would be incomplete if I start just with chapter 6. So for the benefit of all of us, I thought a good beginning would be with chapter 4, which is called The Sacrifice, the Triune Path, and the Lord of the Sacrifice. You see, we have often heard of the idea of sacrifice. Well, what exactly is this concept of sacrifice? It is there in perhaps in all the religions. The question of sacrifice, which comes in different forms. Sometimes it is called surrender, sometimes it may be called self-offering, sometimes it may be called self-giving. And then sacrifice itself we see in the concept of yajna. Sacrifice also we have the crude form on the physical level, where we sacrifice animals to the godheads. So there are many concepts that have been woven around this idea of sacrifice. But Sri Aurobindo goes to the very root of this concept. How and where did this idea, this concept begin? Because if it is such a major idea that has influenced human culture and society and thinking and emotion, obviously it must be having some deep roots, some metaphysical roots. Otherwise, such an idea wouldn't have taken grip of human mind. So in this chapter 4, he begins, I'll take up a few lines from here, maybe first paragraph, and see what is the metaphysical or the philosophic concept of sacrifice. The law of sacrifice is the common divine action that was thrown out into the world in its beginning as a symbol of the solidarity of the universe. It is by the attraction of this law that a divinizing, a saving power descends to limit and correct and gradually to eliminate the errors of an egoistic and self-divided creation. This descent, this sacrifice of the Purusha, the divine soul submitting itself to force and matter, so that it may inform and illuminate them, is the seed of redemption of this world of inconscience and ignorance. Well, when we read this para, we remember the mother's own story of the creation of this universe. She tells the children of the ashram in their classes a tale that has been passed on since ancient times, and a tale that most of you must have read or heard, or sometimes we ourselves have spoken about it in the class. That is, when the Supreme wanted to manifest himself or create this world or this universe, what he does is he brings out, he brings forth his consciousness. You see, normally, we have this famous line from the Bible where we say, when God decides to create the world, He says, "Let there be light." See, there is a kind of a projection of light, of consciousness, of something that comes forth, comes out of the divine. Here, the mother describes that it is the consciousness of the Supreme which came out. Now, philosophically, you may say, what is the meaning of coming out? Because the divine is always conscious. He is Sat, Chit and Ananda. Well, comes out when we say consciousness is brought forth, it is in a way telling of an objectification, self-objectification. If you understand the word, it is to self-objectify. The world, the universe is nothing but a self-objectification of the divine. I have explained this before, but to repeat once again. You see, when we say the word subject and object, I am the subject. But the moment I say there is an object, that means it is there outside of me which I am perceiving. So an object is something outside of you. You don't call the heart and the lungs in your body as an object. It's part of your being. You don't even see it. But what you see outside of you is the object. So when we say the divine objectifies himself, it means he brings out the universe and looks at it. But then you may say, how can he bring out the universe? Because the universe has no other place but Brahman himself. It is not, nothing can exist beyond and outside Brahman. But here, objectification would mean that what was dormant as a possibility within Satchidananda becomes a possibility. You see what Sri Aurobindo explains in the Life Divine and other places too, is that this multiplicity, that means all this universe, which is called the multiplicity, is there essentially within the divine, but it is unmanifest, not brought out. You see, a woman has the capacity to bear children, to bring out the child from her womb. But she has the potential to create the child in the womb. But when the time comes, she creates the baby in the womb and delivers it. So the universe is nothing but the delivery of this multiplicity out of the womb of the divine. So that is what is called the objectification. So, to come back to the story, the Supreme brings forth his consciousness. That means, kind of, if I can use a simple word, activates his consciousness. You see, for example, when we are sleeping, we are all conscious and yet we are unconscious. That means we are not awake. Consciousness is there, but we say it is dormant. In the morning when I wake up, the consciousness becomes active. What we say, I am awake, means what? That means my consciousness is now active, acting, object, it can see the object. So the mothers would tell us that this consciousness came forth. And the Supreme tells this consciousness. And then who is this consciousness? What is the name of this consciousness? Does it have a name at all? Yes. The name of this consciousness is Aditi. The name that was given by the Vedas is Aditi. But interestingly for us, the mother says that consciousness which was brought out by Brahman was me. This is one of the very rare cases when the mother speaks about her own origin. Otherwise, normally we do not see her talking about herself. But that was one instance where she said, that consciousness was me. So immediately you understand who is that mother, who is this mother that you see. She is that original creatrix who was brought out from the womb of Sachidananda. So the Supreme Lord tells the mother that now you create the world, because always the consciousness or Chit Shakti, consciousness force, because consciousness alone cannot create the world. There has to be Shakti, force, energy, power. So the mother is the Chit Shakti. So she being both the consciousness and the force, the Supreme Lord says, you create the world, or the universe, not the world. But then the mother, she brings forth 4 other aspects. They are this life and love and knowledge and light. So she brings forth some of these 4 different aspects and tells them to go ahead and create. She what she does is she delegates her powers to 4 other powers called life and love and knowledge and all that. But these 4 delegated powers, in the beginning they obey the source, they obey the mother. But after a time they said, after all, we are independent. We are ourselves the great powers. Don't mistake these 4 powers with the 4 aspects of the mother, they are different. So they felt independent and they went on their own. And unfortunately, to be independent of the divine leads us inevitably into sorrow and suffering. This ignorance is nothing but being independent of the divine. So these 4 powers, when they said, we have nothing to do with the mother, we are independent, they went on a wrong track, so to say. And they created falsehood and ignorance and darkness and death. So the world, the first creation of this universe, there was nothing but darkness and death and suffering. That is what Aurobindo calls as the inconscience. So, inconscience was the very opposite of the divine. And that inconscience is nothing but, as I said again and again, darkness and death and falsehood. And that is precisely the secret of our life, the secret of yoga. What do we want to do in yoga? The word yoga itself tells you it's union with the divine. Why do you want to do yoga? Because you want to get union with the divine. Why is it that you want to get the union with the divine? Because you are divided from the divine. When did you get divided? Well, those primordial times when these 4 powers went away from the divine. So what is the process of this yoga? Simple process. We want to unite with the divine by the process of becoming dependent on the divine. This is so, the more you become independent of the divine, the more you are in ignorance and darkness. That means you are in falsehood. The more you are dependent, that means you gain back dependency on God. And this process of dependency is called surrendering, is called sacrifice. So you see, it's a very beautiful, the mother has given a story, but through the story we see the essence of this yoga. That in the beginning, that was a story in the Bible also. Adam and Eve, they disobey disobey God, and they're thrown out onto this earth from the Garden of Eden. That means they have gone away from the divine, they have gone separated from the divine, they have become independent of the divine, and they are back on earth, or not back on earth, they are on earth. That means they are divided from Garden of Eden. So everywhere we see the concept of separation. And again, to get back to the divine is called yoga. And the process of becoming more and more dependent on the divine is called surrendering. So surrendering is not surrendering your faculties, your intelligence, your wealth, your poverty, nothing. You can have wealth or poverty or intelligence or your artistic capacities, a great musician or a great politician. You can do all this, but just have this constant feeling of the dependency. I am dependent upon God for me to write. I am dependent upon God for me to speak. I am not independent of Him in any of my actions, any of my thoughts, any of my feelings. So the more you get this kind of a feeling, the more you are slowly treading back. That is the essence of the meaning of sacrifice or surrender. But in this original story, what we are referring to as the sacrifice of the Purusha, what happens? The mother tells us that when this world became something opposite, mother asked the Supreme, saying, "Look, I thought the world would be a beautiful place, but it's become the opposite, the inconscience. Please come down into the inconscience and uplift or bring it back." So the divine, he accepts. He says, "I will myself plunge into the inconscience." So that was the very first descent of the divine into the inconscience. And that first descent is in a way called the first avatar, the first incarnation. So the divine, from his abode of absolute consciousness, comes into the darkness of the absolute inconscience. So that is called the first sacrifice. That means he has left behind his great Unitarian consciousness, his Chit Shakti, his light, his bliss, his Ananda, and descended into an inconscience where there is neither Ananda, nor light, nor consciousness, nor power. But then Sri Aurobindo explains, now this is where the explanation comes in. I can take up the line. It is by the attraction of this law that a divinizing, a saving power descends, a saving power of the divine descends to limit and correct and gradually to eliminate the errors of an egoistic and self-divided creation. So this creation is the self-creation, is a self-divided creation, and then it is by the attraction of this law. So the divine says, I will come down myself and attract this creation back to myself. So to get back this inconscient back to consciousness is called philosophically the process of evolution. You see, put into simple terms, is not all that complex. So the creation going back to the divine is evolution, and the creation coming out from the divine into the undivine is called the involution. So involution and evolution are two different movements. One is the descent of the divine into inconscience, and the other is the ascent of the divine from the inconscience to the consciousness. So this is called, this descent, this sacrifice of the Purusha. So this is the great sacrifice that the Vedas have spoken about. The Gita too speaks about that there is a Purusha who has done this great sacrifice. That is the descent. But then the divine comes down, and as he puts it here, trying to bring back creation out of its limitation. The divine soul submitting itself to force and matter so that it may inform and illuminate them is the seed of redemption of this world of inconscience and ignorance. So that is where the word sacrifice is first uttered, the sacrifice of the Purusha. But in this book, the mother, Sri Aurobindo mentions this holocaust of the mother, the sacrifice of the divine mother. Well, that's a different concept, but similarly, it's the mother, the divine mother, who comes down into the world. However, to follow this idea here in the book, for with sacrifice as their companion, says the Gita, the All-Father created these peoples. The acceptance of the law of sacrifice is a practical recognition by the ego that it is neither alone in the world nor chief in the world. You see, we are dealing with a metaphysical concept. Later on, we'll bring it into the level of yoga. Now, that was the first sacrifice, but then you see the word is the law of sacrifice, is the common divine action that was thrown out into the world. Now, what is this law of sacrifice? That means, you see, the moment you are sacrificing to, surrendering to, giving yourself to, it shows that you are giving yourself to some other higher force, higher consciousness, higher power. What does it imply? That means in the world, in this universe, you are not the only person. There is a higher consciousness called God or divine or power, whatever. So sacrifice, if you keep this word sacrifice or surrender constantly in your mind, what does it tell us? That there is a divinity around you, that there is a divine consciousness enveloping this world, which is looking at us, looking after us, our needs, our problems, our suffering. So we try to connect with that power, and it is that, he says, is a practical recognition by the ego that is neither alone in the world nor chief in the world. So the concept of surrender is also psychologically very important to give us recognition of a divine power that is around us. And then it is its admission that even in this much fragmented existence, there is beyond itself and behind that which is not its own egoistic person, something greater and completer, a diviner all which demands from it subordination and service. So we are only trying to develop this idea philosophically, that how very important, even in our integral yoga, we constantly say surrender to the mother. You see, why do we constantly repeat this, not only verbally, orally, but whole mental consciousness? Mother and Sri Aurobindo constantly tell us to surrender. Because the very fact that you want to surrender, you are remembering the divine. You see, that is the beauty of this word surrender. You constantly remember the mother. You constantly remember the divine. So remembering the divine itself brings you the consciousness of the divine. You come closer to the presence of the divine. So you see, what other way can we really remember the divine? You see, if I am really so much engrossed in my work, can I really remember the divine when I am digging the garden, when I am really running for an Olympic race, when I am writing an essay, sitting at the computer? I cannot have a parallel consciousness, at least at this stage. So the mother would say, constantly remember to offer. Remember and offer, that is her mantra. So offer, the self-giving, is the act of surrender or sacrifice. So that brings you a constant memory that there is the divine and to whom you are giving up yourself. Indeed, sacrifice is imposed, and where need be, compelled by the universal world force. It takes it even from those who do not consciously recognize the law. Inevitably, because this is the intrinsic nature of things. Now this is beautiful again. You see, this whole universe, whole world is constantly sacrificing. Why and to whom? You see, the very first act of sacrifice was from the divine who comes down into the inconscience. So now the whole of inconscience is again sacrificing, means giving itself up to the Lord. So about inconscience we cannot speak of much, but look around us, what nature does. You see the flowers, they bloom, they give their beauty, the color, the fragrance. Why are they doing that? Because they are giving themselves as an adoration to the divine, saying, look, this is what I have, I am giving to you. And again, if you see the cycles, the food cycles, it's the same thing. The animals eating the vegetables and we eating the vegetables. There's a whole sacrifice of one to the other. So the law of sacrifice is really universal, is really there in everything that we see around. But the thing is, the animal and the plants, they do it unconsciously. But nature is taking this sacrifice or doing this sacrifice. But with human beings, we are expected to do sacrifice consciously. That is the whole difference. You see, if I do not make a surrender or sacrifice consciously, I am doing it unconsciously. Because that is the law. You see, I take food, and then the food that has come from the vegetables. So I consume that. It gets back into energy. Then I give that energy back into the people or to God. So there is a cycle. And even amongst human beings, I do an action, somebody else benefits out of that. That action, someone else repeats it. So you see, we are passing on action one to the other. So there is a constantly you are giving yourself. But the difference is when it comes to yoga, that if this giving to the human beings in whatever form, you give a talk, you give a lecture, you earn money, you donate money, this giving to the human beings in whatever form you are giving, if it can be inwardly turned into a giving to the divine, and you do it consciously, if you do that consciously, what you gain is the joy of giving, the ananda of giving. Otherwise, if you don't give, nature will take your energies and pass them on. But yoga is giving which gives you the bliss, the joy. So that's the only difference. Otherwise, even if you don't want to give, You don't have to give it consciously, but nature will take it. Take your energies, take your works, take your things. But if I do a thing consciously, what I gain is the joy of giving. So that's what Sri Aurobindo is referring to here. That it takes even from those who do not consciously recognize the law, inevitably, because this is the intrinsic nature of things. Our ignorance or our false egoistic view of life can make no difference to this eternal bedrock truth of nature. For this is the truth in nature, that this ego, which thinks itself a separate independent being and claims to live for itself, is not and cannot be independent nor separate, nor can it live to itself even if it would, but rather all are linked together by a secret oneness. You see how deep this concept goes. Let us not think, oh, yoga, why should I do yoga? That's why Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga is called nature's yoga. Another word for integral yoga is nature's yoga. What Sri Aurobindo is doing, has done, is to follow this universal law of sacrifice and giving it a personal touch, giving it a personal effort, giving it a conscious effort. You see, if left to humanity, the supermind would always come, would have come in the process of evolution. But it would have taken thousands and thousands of years more left to nature. So Sri Aurobindo says, no, I would like to hasten the descent of this supermind. So he and the mother, they do a tapasya by which the supermind is hastened. So that which would have come after 5,000 years came maybe 50 years. In 1956 it was there already. So what they have done is only hastened what was the future, they have brought it into the present. A future that was there 3,000 years hence has been brought down today. But it is there in the inevitable march of evolution. So Sri Aurobindo and the mother have not gone out of the evolution to do something miraculous. No, they have done what is inevitable in evolution. So we must remember Sri Aurobindo and the mother are not miracle doers. They have only hastened the process of evolution. Because if this hastening was not there, mankind perhaps is not guaranteed. Its existence is not guaranteed. Because our unilateral growth into the mind, into matter, into materialism would have been lopsided and mankind would have destroyed itself. So the hastening of the supermind has kind of assured the existence of mankind, a continuation of mankind. Well, a mankind not exactly as it is today, but a mankind that is transformed. However, so one thing is what Sri Aurobindo tells us, all are linked together by a secret oneness. You see, we are all doing this for each other because basically we are all one. Apparently we don't recognize that this oneness exists, but from the metaphysical point of view, we are all one. That is why we may will it or not, we may want it or not, we are exchanging, we are giving to each other. Because there is one supreme consciousness. But the tragedy is, human beings do not do this exchange consciously and willingly. And therefore we resist this giving, this offering, even the joy. And it is this resistance which says, no, I will not give this. It's mine, it's my property, my people, my wife, my children. So we insist so much on the my that we kind of build a solid concrete wall around us, limit ourselves so tragically, so pathetically, that there is no way that the divine can really penetrate us. So we get suffering, so we have body suffering, we have body pains, mental resistance, psychological suffering, and then we blame the divine, saying, look, God, I am suffering. And God says, well, how are you suffering? He says, I have a pain, it's my pain in the back, my pain in the head, my sorrow, my suffering. He would say, well, as long as you call my pain, that means you are in love with your pain. You say my suffering, you don't want to disown that. So he says, as long as you want to hold on to my pain, my suffering, my sorrow, my problems, they will be yours. The day you say it is your suffering, your pain, your sorrow, your suffering, then he says, I will take it. But as long as you want to possess it, go ahead. So ultimately what happens? One of the purposes of the sorrow and suffering and pain I see is to really begin to disown. At a point you say, my God, why is this suffering coming to me so often, so many times? But you see, in the mind is always the word my pain. We never say his pain or her pain or God's pain. We seem to be constantly telling ourselves the my. So as long as there is this question of the possession, this possession of the my, you will not be bereft of sorrow and suffering. So this is the secret, and this is the innate secret, that there is a oneness where we give to each other, and the more we open these doors and break down these walls and become one with the others, then only we'll have greater joy. So this is very important. He says, it is not and cannot be independent, not separate, nor can it live to itself even if it would. So now we understand. In fact, in the Life Divine, those of you who are with me, I think if I can remember, Madhu was with me in the Life Divine, and maybe Indu, and one or two here. If you remember, he says even the genesis of pain, physical pain, is your incapacity to bear Ananda. You see, the Ananda, the bliss is so much around you, but you are not able to bear it. You are not able to stand it. And that resistance to reject, when you reject Ananda, that turns into pain. But he says, if we can open ourselves and say, no, nothing is mine, body is not mine, the mind is not mine, the vital is not mine, and this is not me, is all you. So then if you throw open the doors of your mental prejudices, of your physical belongings, of your minus, even the very question of my body. You see, the word my is so dangerous all the time. Because the Lord would say, as long as you call it your pain or my pain, is your pain. So the whole concept of the minus is the concept of ego. The lesser I call everything mine, the greater is my freedom from the ego. So he tells us, our ignorance or our false egoistic view of life can make no difference to this eternal bedrock truth of nature. I mean, this is such an important line. I mean, I'm not able to explain as much as I can, as much as I want to. Because he says it's a bedrock truth of nature, that this law of sacrifice, the earlier, the sooner we recognize and practice it, the better for us. Because otherwise nature, he says, all right, if you don't recognize this law, then until that time you will suffer. Each existence is continually giving out perforce from its stock, out of its mental receipts from nature, or its vital and physical assets and acquisitions and belongings. A stream goes to all that is around it, and always again it receives something from its environment in return. For its voluntary or involuntary tribute. For it is only by this giving and receiving that it can effect its own growth, while at the same time it helps the sum of things. You see, this is what I was explaining. Willingly, voluntarily or involuntarily, we are giving to the environment and we are receiving from the environment. If I give you something, maybe invisibly I receive something. So this act of giving, I am surrendering, I am sacrificing to somebody, and that person is sacrificing again. So we are all exchanging continuously. This is a fact that cannot be denied. I mean, you look around yourself in nature, in mankind, in everything that I am doing, I am offering to the sum, as it says, the word is the sum of a human endeavor. Help the sum of things. You see, if we have built a sakar here, then I have contributed something to the sum, the totality of this Aurobindonian movement, of spreading Aurobindo's thought. So I have contributed something. So there is a sum total. I may not exist tomorrow, but I would have contributed to the sum total. But then somebody else takes up this work, contributes more. So by offering myself, by sacrificing, surrendering myself, I have uplifted, enlarged the scope of humanity and taken a billion, perhaps a billion or 10 billion degrees closer to the divine. So this is how each one of us, not only this question of building sakar, each one of us, whatever work we do, it is being added to the sum total. But the only difference in yoga is, if you do that consciously, then you have the joy, you have the ananda. And that's exactly what we are all trying to get in life. Happiness, greater joy, greater this thing. But here is a simple trick. You don't have to earn a billion rupees to get to be happy. And on the contrary, if you earn a billion rupees, you may be more happy than when you are earning 1,000 rupees. So it's not, so whatever, sum and substances, we want to be happier. And Sri Aurobindo would say, you will have the ananda, not only happiness, but something, ananda is 1,000-fold more than all happiness put together. So you will have the happiness if you surrender consciously to the divine. All that you do. There is nothing small in God's eyes, as the Purushottam himself says. Be it a shoemaker or be it a king, the divine is happy with that. So let us not think, I am only a small shoemaker here, what have I got to give to the divine? So for him, it depends how you give. So he puts it again, at length, though at first slowly and partially, we learn to make the conscious sacrifice. Even in the end, we take joy to give ourselves and what we envisage as belonging to us in a spirit of love and devotion to that which appears for the moment other than ourselves and is certainly other than our limited personalities. The sacrifice and the divine return for our sacrifice then become a gladly accepted means towards our last perfection. For it is recognized now as the road to the fulfillment in us of the eternal purpose. You see, Sri Aurobindo is very pragmatic. He says we cannot sacrifice fully right in the beginning. The sense of the mind, the sense of ego does not leave us so easily. So he says we do it very slowly and partially. We learn to make the conscious sacrifice. But in the end, we take joy to give ourselves and what we envisage as belonging to us in a spirit of love and devotion. So if we can really apply this to human society, you look at the sadhus, the great saints, the great rishis. I mean, what is the difference between us, the common man, and the rishi and the sage and the saint? It is precisely this, that he has learned to give everything of himself to others. Be it his wealth, be it his possession, be it his house, be it his emotion, be it his blessing, be it his thought. The more you give to the others means not human being, please remember. First you give it to the divine. And it is for the divine to give to the people. It is the divine who chooses the people. You cannot be sitting in Pondicherry and you say, I will give this message only to the Canadians or only to French or to the Chinese. But if you offer to the divine shares it with humanity. So he says, whatever we think belongs to me, I give it to the divine. So that is the metaphysical concept of the word sacrifice or surrender. And that's precisely the difference between a rishi and a common man. The common man has limited, shrunk himself into his ego, built a barrier around himself. But the rishi has broken all the barriers, has given up himself entirely to the divine. So, talking about that, that's exactly what we see in the mother and Sri Aurobindo. You see, in Sri Aurobindo, right from the beginning, he never called his own family, he never thought of his own family. When he was in England, he was living with his brothers and sisters, but there's no question of possessiveness. When he came to India, it was always he thought of the country. He used to earn a lot of money being a professor and being a personal secretary to the Maharaja of Gaikwad, but all the money he never used. He said, I will take only that much money which is necessary for my existence. The rest belongs to others. So he used to keep the money on his desk, and his servants or his helpers, anybody would take that. So he really practiced it, giving to others, giving to the divine. And then for him, divinity at the time was the country. So he gave himself completely to the country. And then afterwards, when he comes to Pondicherry, of course, he gives himself to humanity. He never ever thought about himself, that what shall I do? Shall I become a great yogi? Should I write the life divine? Never. He wrote all these books not for himself. It was not at all necessary to write the synthesis or the life divine or even Savitri. Because Savitri, he says, is a different way. He used it for the ascent of his own consciousness. But why did he write all that? Again, to give himself to the humanity. Completely, all his experience. Imagine every word in the synthesis, every word in the life divine, every word in the Savitri is his own personal experience. The other day, we were mentioning about that he says, I've suffered more than anybody in the past or the present. Yes. That's why he is able to write this synthesis, write all those 4 volumes of the letters, because he has experienced himself. And then the beauty, he has given up himself to the divine. So never he assures that I am going to bring the supermind at the end of the world. No. He says we are trying a new step in evolution. So whoever comes into contact with their writings are coming into contact with their consciousness. So why do we read the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, although we have got a whole backlog of, we have got great pujas and great mantras and great these things. We have got, in India there's not dearth of spiritual books. And yet why are we, a small community, clinging to these words of this mother and Sri Aurobindo. Because that is the consciousness that is live, palpable, vibrant, and connecting with that consciousness will give us a very dynamic sense of sacrifice. Very frankly, if you ask me to sacrifice to Lord Rama, I cannot. I know he is a great avatar, I know historicity, I do not deny Rama. But if you ask me to sacrifice myself, surrender myself to the mother and Sri Aurobindo, they are there historically, not only because I have seen the mother, but they were there until 1973. But somebody else was there 2000 years back. Someone else was there 3000 years back. So this consciousness of the mother and Sri Aurobindo is, as somebody said, you cannot but breathe the consciousness of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. They're so thick in the atmosphere. You cannot but breathe them. You breathe oxygen. Yes, physically you breathe oxygen. But spiritually you breathe them. So that is the magnificent thing why we are turning to Mother and Sri Aurobindo. A spiritual consciousness which has achieved the supermind is around us so concretely. So that is why the concept of sacrifice is so essential in the Bhagavad Gita as well as in Sri Aurobindo. And of course, Vedas had started this word surrender in the name of yajna. Yajna was the same process of giving to the Lord, giving to the gods, and receiving from the gods. So there was an interchange of man and God. So you see, our entire Indian civilization began with this or stands on this notion of yajna, of sacrifice, of surrender, of offering to the divine. So if this is the prima facie of Indian spirituality, so this is where Sri Aurobindo comes to the concept. And here I have somebody asked a question to the mother, and I thought I could read it out to you. In the very first para, the one that I read out, based on that, somebody asked the mother. This is, I don't know if you have this book, Mother's Talks on the Synthesis of Yoga. This is a small little book. Well, this actually, you will find this in Mother's volumes also. Is not, there is a separate book. These are in volumes 7 and 8 of the Mother's collected works. These comments are available there. Volume 7 and 8 of the Mother's collected works. Now, to come back, sweet Mother, what does the sacrifice to the divine mean? You see, we have been talking about sacrifice to the Mother, to the divine. And then let me add a little side note that the Mother has given us once. It says, sometimes the word sacrifice is not understood correctly because of the negative practices that have been done under the name of sacrifice, especially killing animals, killing human beings as offerings. So the word sacrifice has taken on a kind of a negative connotation, at least culturally. So she says, I would prefer to use the word surrender. So there's a little shade, although on the level of the Gita and the Vedas we know what it is, but in the modern context, because of the misuse of the word sacrifice by human beings, so Mother says, let us use the word surrender. So remember, when we say the word sacrifice to the divine, don't immediately think of the butchering the animals or butchering the children or butchering this. That's not the word. So what does the sacrifice to the divine mean? Mother, it is self-giving. It is the word the Gita uses for self-giving. only the sacrifice is mutual. This is what Sri Aurobindo says at the beginning. The divine has sacrificed himself in matter to awaken consciousness in matter which had become inconscient. And it is this sacrifice, this giving of the divine in matter, that is to say, his dispersion in matter, which justifies the sacrifice of matter to the divine and makes it obligatory, for it is one and the same reciprocal movement. I mean, this is really loaded with philosophy. When we said that there is this universal law of sacrifice, how did it begin? We said the divine has first come down into the inconscient. And come down into the inconscient means come into the very atoms of matter. As we say, Brahman has become atomic. So when he has come down into matter, matter as a gesture of gratitude. If somebody gives you something, you return that gift by something else as a gesture of gratitude, and you say, thank you for giving me that. Can I give you a little bit of this? So matter as a gesture of gratitude is now itself giving back to the divine. And what is it giving? Its beauty, its flowers, its fauna, its flora, its human beings, its aspiration. So the first gesture of the divine to come down into matter was such a great holocaust that this whole of creation is kind of singing the tune of the divine and say, "Oh Lord, I give back to you my sunshine, my moonshine, my flowers, my fragrance, the whole of this beauty." So this gesture of giving back is what is the sacrifice of nature, which is kind of response, obligatory. It says, it is because the divine has given himself in matter and scattered himself everywhere in matter to awaken it to the divine consciousness, that matter is automatically under the obligation to give itself to the divine. It's a mutual and reciprocal sacrifice. So you see, in Savitri you have that great line that the divine has put on our nature so that we may put on his nature. It's a simple theory of the avatar. Why does an avatar come down? Because he puts on human nature. I mean, our problems, our drawbacks, our weaknesses, our ailments, that's why he suffered everything. Because he has put on human nature. So every kind of suffering he puts on so that we may put on his nature. So there is again an interchange and exchange. He gives himself and we give ourselves to him. And we giving ourselves to him is surrender. I mean, this is such a magnificent philosophy and almost logic that she would say that the scattered himself everywhere in matter to awaken it to its divine consciousness, that the matter is automatically under the obligation to give itself to the divine. When you do a gesture, I return the gesture, the good gesture. And this is the great secret of the Gita, the affirmation of the divine presence in the very heart of matter. And that is why matter must sacrifice itself to the divine automatically, even unconsciously, whether one wants it or not. This is what happens. You see, matter, life, animals, they are all giving this sacrifice unconsciously. When it comes to man, we are expected to do the sacrifice consciously. But unfortunately, 99.9% of humanity doesn't do it consciously at all. We keep earning money, we want happiness, we want property, we want this, we want that. But it's for ourselves. But that is a kind of an indirect offering to the sum total of humanity. But then Sri Aurobindo would say, if only you did what all you are doing as an offering to the divine, you will see the difference in your life. The joy, the multiple benefits of your personal efforts, because you are doing it for yourself, for your children, for your family, even the benefits are limited. But it just says exactly what all you are doing, instead of turning to the family and to yourself, turn it to the divine. And there you will see a tremendous difference in life. So this is the universal law. Only when it is done unconsciously one doesn't have the joy of sacrifice. While it is done consciously, one has the joy of sacrifice, which is the supreme joy. The word sacrifice in French has slightly too narrow a sense, which it doesn't have in the original Sanskrit. For in French, sacrifice implies a sort of suffering, almost a regret, while in Sanskrit this sense is not there at all. It corresponds to self-giving. You see, she's explaining, as I was telling you, the word sacrifice, especially in French, sacrifier. That means even normally we also use that, I've sacrificed my property for you, I've sacrificed my future for you, I've sacrificed my life for you. Sometimes the parents in their anger tell us, I've sacrificed so much for you. That means there's been a kind of a regret. I wish I had not given you all that. There's a sense of regret. Why did I sacrifice? I could have been in America, but I've done a great sacrifice by staying here in Pondicherry. That means you are regretting. So she says the word sacrifier in French has this negative sense. It's a kind of, I'm thinking too much about myself, and I tell my child, it's but for you I'm here, otherwise I would have been a richer man, richer person. So she says, let us take to the word yajna of Vedas or Sanskrit, where there is no negative connotation. So instead of yajna, we use the word surrender, which is a more positive thing, and we have the word self-offering and self-giving, which do not carry this negative connotation. So there is this question. Well, I have one more letter, but I think we'll take a short break and we'll come back by about 10:30. I'll explain this a little more before I take up the second question. Yeah, in the morning session, we looked into the metaphysical concept of sacrifice. Now, in the same chapter called the Sacrifice, chapter 4, we have a close definition of sacrifice. What I was referring to about the negative aspect of sacrifice that we have nowadays, Aurobindo takes it up here. He says the vulgar conception of sacrifice is an act of painful self-immolation, austere self-mortification, difficult self-effacement. This kind of sacrifice may go even as far as self-mutilation and self-torture. So this is what we are referring to. This is the vulgar, that means the common concept of sacrifice. He says it is there in our culture and in most of the cultures. It has become something of painful self-immolation, austere self-mortification, difficult self-effacement. That means we try to bring about a greater pain onto ourselves. You have seen in India there are lots of people who put their bodies into a great pain, thinking that is a part of the sacrifice. So this is a negative thing, but that's what it is happening nowadays. So Aurobindo says that's not the right concept that we are referring to. So what we are referred to as sacrifice has nothing to do with this kind of a self-immolation or self-mortification, etc. These things may be temporarily necessary in man's hard endeavor to exceed his natural self. If the egoism in his nature is violent and obstinate, It has to be met sometimes by an answering strong internal repression and counterbalancing violence. But Sri Aurobindo, as usual, gives a beautiful explanation of even this violent action. He says, in the beginning, sometimes when the human ego is very violent and obstinate, that means, sometimes people, they feel that they have done something so bad, so harsh, that they feel like, putting themselves into suffering, more as an act of regret, as an act of repentance. So you even say to a God, if you do that, because I've done something wrong, we have this question of confessions in Christianity, where you confess that you have done something wrong, and as a punishment you are ready to take upon yourself any kind of body immolation or body suffering. So this is a kind of a religious sentiment of regretting. Then you want to take punishment upon yourself because you have done something sinful. But all those are very rudimentary religion. They have nothing to do with spirituality. In spirituality, we don't have anything like a regret. Everything gets a kind of a balanced view. So Sri Aurobindo, he is explaining that at a particular stage of human evolution, you see, what is beautiful in Sri Aurobindo is that he gives a place to all thought, all practices. Everything is right, because everything, when it is done at the proper time, it is right. What is exactly wrong in this world? Even in my thing, even in your actions. Every action is justifiable, has its own place. But when the same action is done out of place, out of time, then that becomes something wrong. Otherwise, humanity has had this tremendous thing of sacrifice, animal sacrifice, this self-immolation, etc. There was a stage, Sri Aurobindo, when humanity was very, very violent in its ego. So to suppress this violent ego, they had to take to extreme measures. But when humanity surpasses this violent ego, it becomes more understanding. Then we don't need this kind of a thing. So there was a time, but if those animal sacrifices are even carried out to today, that becomes something out of place, out of time. So that is what is actually in the life divine. The beauty is he embraces all human thought, giving everyone the proper slot in time and space. And then saying so, he says, now what is going to be in the future? This is the future vision of Superman. In that new future, will this thing fit or not? So he would say, religions are over. The time of religions is over. Not because religions, he doesn't want them, but in the future scenario of the supramental consciousness, religion has no place. Religiosity has no place. So he says the time of religions is over. But there was a time when religion was necessary, because it was to train the violent ego of man to be able to surrender, to sacrifice, to look up to somebody other than his own ego. But the time is now right when we have to not only look up to God, but manifest God in our day-to-day life. So that is the way religion cannot help. Religion only says, pray to God, go to church, go to temple, go here and there. But here, in spirituality, God is not in a building, in a place, in a church, in a cathedral. No. He is there, as we say, Brahman is everywhere. So we have to realize the divine as the Ananda Brahman, the Brahman who is all around, the Brahman who is within. Not just the Brahman in the shape of a God with a name in a church or in a temple or in a Gurdwara. So spirituality has liberated the divine, has liberated God from his own sanctum sanctorum. So this kind of a new understanding that is coming about is what is important, and in that all these religions etc. have no role. So what I am trying to explain is that there is a place for everything in human civilization, but anything that goes, that continues, that lasts beyond its term, as we say, becomes wrong. So too, he said, this kind of a sacrifice has had its use, but not now. But the Gita discourages any excess of violence done to oneself, for the self within is really the Godhead evolving. It is Krishna, it is the divine. It is not to be troubled and tortured as the titans of the world trouble and torture it, but to be increasingly fostered, cherished, luminously opened to a divine light and strength and joy and wideness. You see, this is now in the new light of the Gita and integral yoga, we say the body must not be put to suffering, any kind of suffering. Why should the body suffer because of your sins, which have been done by your vital, by your mental, by your ego? So the body says, what have I done that you are putting me to suffering? I have done nothing. I have been a very obedient servant. So you punish a servant because he has obeyed you? That's injustice. What has done what has done in you the action? Your ego, your vital cravings, your longings, your passion, your this thing. So body revolts and says, sorry, I don't want to take your punishment. If you have done something violent on the vital level, punish your vital. But why me, the body? So immediately there is this revolt, and Aurobindo says, we have to respect the body. And as he puts it beautifully, we have to foster it, cherish it, luminously open it to a divine light and strength and joy and wideness. So instead of really punishing the body for what it has not done, you cultivate the body. You make it strong. So that the body also feels part of this evolution. That why should I become spiritual? I would say I reach God and the body has to suffer. There is no meaning in that. I want to reach the soul, and then the body is to be blamed, is to be suffered, is to put into suffering. So the question is, in the spiritual attitude, body also has to attain its own divinity, because there is a divinity in the body. So just as we meditate to have the silence of the mind and say, oh, I want to open myself to the great supramental consciousness, just as the vital emotion, they say, I want to reach my psychic being, my God in the temple and the God within. So the body also has a divinity. It also aspires for immortality. If mind wants peace and if the vital wants the psychic joy, body wants immortality. So that is the prayer of the body, to be immortal. The attempt of the vital emotions is to get the joy, the divine ananda. The attempt of the mind is to go beyond the mind, open itself to the higher levels of the overmind, supermind, intuition, etc. So Aurobindo is telling us that why should you really starve the body and suffer it? It is aspiring for its own immortality. So that is the attitude we have now. All this physical education, all these games and sports and Olympics, they are all a part of this body awakening to its own greatness. So he would say, don't be harsh to it. It is not oneself but the band of the spirit's inner enemies that we have to discourage, expel, slay upon the altar of the growth of the spirit. These can be ruthlessly excised, whose names are desire, wrath, inequality, greed, attachment to outward pleasures and pains, the cohort of usurping demons that are the cause of the soul's errors and suffering. A beautiful explanation. He says, what you have to really sacrifice, really give up, really get rid of is your vital things. So, what are the things that we have to get rid of? Desire, wrath, inequality, greed, attachment to outward pleasures and pain. All these have nothing to do with the body. Greed and anger and inequality and attachment are all vital things and mental things. So, Lord Krishna is telling us, SOY is telling us, you actually get rid of these things. That is the real punishment you have to give to yourself for all the wrongs you are doing. Why pull it upon your body, which does nothing, it only obeys the master? So, real purification is to have the detachment to outward pleasures and pains, etc. These should be regarded not as part of oneself, but as intruders and perverters of our self-real and diviner nature. These have to be sacrificed in the harshest sense of the word. Whatever pain in going, they may throw by reflection on the consciousness of the seeker. This is the real meaning of the old version of sacrifice. If you want to be harsh to yourself, don't punish your body by putting it into starvation for 10 days. And I've seen in South India people rolling across the whole temple courtyard, maybe it is 5 furlongs. They just roll on bare body, the whole body suffers, it gets blisters, it bleeds. And then they think that is a purification. But the next moment you come back, your attachment is there, your greed is there, your wrath is there, your inequality. You have done nothing. Where is the purification? You have just bled your body. But have you bled your attachment? Have you bled your greed? Have you bled your wrath? No. So Aurobindo is telling us, if you want to really give up in a harsh manner, give up these things. That is the real sinful thing. So don't let your body suffer. So, and by the way, he adds a very beautiful phrase here, that whatever pain in going they may throw by reflection on the consciousness of the seeker. You see, when you want to give up attachment and greed and inequality, there is a pain in that. Just as a body, when it rolls across the temple, it bleeds. So try to give up your attachment, your greed. You will see there is a lot of pain. It's not so easy. You will suffer there. Imagine if you are attached to somebody or something, and then you say, no, I should not be attached. I mean, that suffering is a lot more. But if you are ready, do that and not just go across the temple with your body and let it to bleed. So, in one word, sacrifice in the old sense is these lower things, the greed, the attachment, the wrath, the anger. Because Sri Krishna, in one of the verses, he would say, when you are angry, you are not a human being. Anger is so anti-man that he refuses to call human being a human being when he or she is in anger. Because anger really that way puts you out into a different consciousness where you have lost control over your mind, your feelings, your tongue, your words. You see, when you are angry, the language that you use. It is not yourself. When you come back to calmness, you say, my God, did I say that? So what Sri Krishna explains is that at that time you go beyond the human consciousness. That means you have no control. So when you don't have a control of your own mind, you are not a manas, you are not a man, you are not a being with a mind. So when the mind is not there, what right have you got to call yourself a human being? A human being is one who has a mind under his control. But for those 10 minutes, you have killed a person, you have done robbery, you have tortured somebody, because you have been in an animal consciousness, in the vital consciousness. So you are not a manas, you are not a manu, you are not the son of Manu, so you are not man. So I mean, if that is the degradation of this anger and wrath and all that, is get rid of that and not suffer your body. Then the last sentence, But the true essence of sacrifice is not self-immolation, it is self-giving. Its object not self-effacement, but self-fulfillment. Its method not self-mortification, but a greater life. Not self-mutilation, but a transformation of our natural human parts into divine members. Not self-torture, but a passage from a lesser satisfaction to a greater ananda. So this is the true meaning of what you have seen, that it is nothing to do with this self-mortification, self-effacement, self-torture, which has been the old explanation. I mean, in Christianity is there, in Hinduism is there, everywhere is there. Oh, you want to, what the word is, atone for your sins? Do this. Do this harm to your body. Go and be fasting for so many days. Go and. But the whole thing is, they will never tell you really purify all these lower elements. They'll just tell you to stop, to do this, to do that physically. And physically means the physique suffers. On the contrary, what we have in the Gita and what we have in Aurobindo is this question of sacrifice or surrender, is a greater fulfillment, is a greater life, is a greater ananda. So now we are entering into the positive description of sacrifice. So here I read out this passage only to tell us the negative aspect of sacrifice. Negative, not the aspect in the sense, negative understanding of the word sacrifice, which has been glorified in many a religion. And unfortunately, that's not what we want. Both the Gita and Aurobindo do not buy that kind of a attitude or understanding of the word sacrifice. Now, we have seen two things till now: the metaphysical concept of sacrifice and the definition of sacrifice. Now, the third aspect that I am going to take up is who is the recipient of sacrifice? That means, who is the receiver? Who receives your sacrifice? These are just I am highlighting in the paragraph in the chapter some of the important points. So this is on page 97 of my book. Last, there is to be considered the recipient of the sacrifice and the manner of the sacrifice. The sacrifice may be offered to others, or it may be offered to divine powers. It may be offered to the cosmic all, or it may be offered to the transcendent supreme. The worship given may take any shape, from the dedication of a leaf or flower, a cup of water, a handful of rice, a loaf of bread, to consecration of all that we possess and the submission of all that we are. Now, this is the very important question now. We know what is the meaning of sacrifice, the metaphysical thing. Now we are coming to the practical aspect. Now you say, I surrender, I offer, I sacrifice. To whom? Well, again, there are various possibilities. You may sacrifice to others, for your family, for your children, for your nation, for your neighborhood, for your community. That is doing for others. Or it may be offered to divine powers, to gods and goddesses and all that. It may be offered to the cosmic all, or it may be offered to the transcendent supreme. Some people say, no, I give to the divine, I give to Brahman, I give to Vishnu, no gods, no godheads. So there is, the recipients of sacrifice are many on different levels. Now what happens? Is that right or wrong? You see, we have a Sanganyama Koil right on the street. In fact, on 25th of this month, we are having a Masimagam. That means, from the South India, nearby cities and towns, 100 gods who come down to Vaitikopam, this place, I mean, it's supposed to be a very ancient tradition, more than 100 years old. During this time, all the godheads are brought on their chariots, on their vehicles, whatever. They are put near the seashore. You will see the seashore being prepared there. So they are brought here, they are kept a day or two, and then they all take a plunge in the ocean, they get washed, and then they are taken back. So what I mean is, there are all grades. There is this god, Sanganyama, different gods, the Supreme Divine. You may give it to Krishna, you may give it to Rama, you may give it to. So now the question is, to whom do we give? If I give to Ganeshji, if I give it to Krishna, if I give to Lakshmi, I mean, India is full of these gods and goddesses. To whom do we give? So it says, the worship given may take any shape from the dedication of a leaf or a flower. Yeah, that's again, what do you give? The one is the whom do you give, and the other is what do you give? So you may say, I go to the temple, I give the coconut and the agarbatti. You do that every morning. You go to the flower, you give a garland of flowers. Some people do that here. So this is not sacrifice, this is the self of offering, giving. So you may give a flower, a cup of water, a handful of rice. You see, Sri Aurobindo is taking the smallest examples, because in the Gita, the Lord Himself says, you may give me pushpam and phallam and all that. So he says the same thing, the pushpam, the leaf or the grass or the glass of water, the handful of rice, a loaf of bread. We have in Christianity the bread. If you go to the church, you see the offering of bread and wine. So that's there. To consecration. Now the question is, whoever the recipient, whatever the gift, it is the supreme, the eternal in things, who receives and accepts it, even if it be rejected or ignored by the immediate recipient. That's very, very important. You see, this is again Sri Krishna who tells. He says, to whomever you give the offering, to Sanganyama here, or a Kartikeyan there, or a Ganesh Mandir. You see, when you come into Sakar itself, you will find maybe 3 temples here. I mean, one very small on this right side of the street. I mean, all kinds of gods are there. But then there are other gods. He says it doesn't matter to whom you give this sacrifice or this offering. Lord Krishna says it all comes to me. That's a magnificent, a great solace. But the important thing is, even if it be rejected or ignored by the immediate recipient, that's the master key. You see, even amongst human beings, you say, oh, I have given to my son so much, I have given to my father, I have given to my uncle. But you know, he was very, very, I mean, he was never grateful. He never told me thanks, I gave him so much. I offered, and then even to the God, I have given him so much. And you go to Tirupati, you give him 10 lakhs of rupees, but Tirupati never gave me anything back. But fortunately, the Tirupati never asked you from where did you get those 10 lakhs of rupees. If I had asked you that question, you would have been embarrassed. He doesn't ask, but he doesn't give you also that we have a complaint, you see, I have given to God and all. Now the question is, even if the immediate recipient does not receive it, Lord says, I receive it. Ultimately, all these small alleys and lanes and by-lanes, they reach the supreme highway that goes to the divine supreme. So Lord Krishna says, I mean, do not think that this word pushpam jalam is a random smallness of a thing. It's not just a little flower or a glass of water. But in that, you see, there is a greater significance. It is almost a random example, but behind that pushpam and jalam, the random example, there is the connotation of integral yoga. That means you may offer to me anything, a glass of water, little paper written there, or a lecture, or going to the garden and digging up your garden, putting manure there, or going to the United Nations Embassy and giving a talk. It matters little. The housewife says, oh, I am only a housewife cooking for my husband for the last 40 years. And maybe she is much more spiritual than the husband who has been working and egoistically saying, I am bringing money. That husband never got out of the eye, but the wife, she is completely beyond the eye, lot more, because she has been offering with great love. So it's not the question of what you are cooking for your husband or children. Even that cooking, that little chapati that you make, he says, if you offer that to me, it comes straight to me. And Lord Krishna he loves good food. So I think all the housewives should offer your food to the Lord. Even Rama doesn't like much food, nor does Christ. But Sri Krishna is a lovely fellow. He can take a laddu or a chapati or a dokla or anything. So what I want to say is what Sri Krishna has uttered almost en passant, as we say, Pushpam Jalam, is a beautiful example that anything tiny, small, so-called important, unimportant, it doesn't matter. If you give me, he says, if you give me, some people may give it to Sanganyaman here. But he says, even if Sanganyaman doesn't say this is not vada sambar, this is only a dokla, I don't like Gujarati. But he says, I will take it, don't bother. So even if the immediate goddess does not like it, or the god does not like it, Sri Krishna would say, it comes to me. I mean, that gives you such a great warmth of devotion, Then you feel like doing. He says, my God, Lord says all this comes to me. And we have seen so many examples. I mean, there was a long back, there is in Pune an ashram of Dilip Kumar Roy. I don't know if some of you have seen it. Dilip Kumar Roy was a sadhakya. He left the ashram and then went and established his own ashram. He was a great devotee, lover of Sri Krishna. I mean, he was so great a lover. I mean, you can think of Mirabai. He is almost equivalent to that. That means this is a fact told by Mother and Aurobindo, so we cannot doubt it. I don't know, all of you here must have gone to Aurobindo's room. You see, before entering the Aurobindo's room, there is an antechamber, the small chamber there. So Dilip Kumar Roy used to sing bhajans in the name of Sri Krishna there, and Mother and Aurobindo would be in their hall, and they would see Lord Krishna dancing in front of them in response to Dilip Kumar Roy's songs. Dilip Kumar himself did not see the Lord Krishna, but Mother and Aurobindo used to see Lord Krishna dancing away. So that was the magnificent devotion, as Mirabai, when she sang, maybe Lord Krishna was there. But here was Dilip Roy, who sang, and Krishna came to dance. So all these Krishna Leelas and all that are not mythical stories. Your Ras Leelas, Gujarat celebrates in a great way during Navratri. They are not stories. They are actual spiritual realities even today. So if you can really dance with that devotion and not dance as it happens in your Garba and Gujarati to show off your dresses. Most of the women there, I've seen, they go with their best attire to attract men and women, not to attract God. But if he really did that, he would be attracted even today. So that's why he says that Lord, this I was telling you. So he has an ashram there. And as usual, there's Krishna Janmashtami and all that. So once my father was there actually during this pujas, and as soon as he entered the hall, it's a big hall, it seems, I've never been to that ashram. There was a tremendous fragrance of jasmine, but there's no jasmine garlands anywhere. So the whole hall was, full with jasmine. And jasmine, the flower itself, is resonant of Sri Krishna's name. And then another devotee, he narrated saying that really in the present times he gave an offering to Lord Krishna, and Lord Krishna scooped it out. One could see the scoop out of that prasad. So these are not stories of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, whom we don't know. It's today. They have happened in the last 20 years, 30 years. So what I want to tell is only to tell this question of the Lord says all the offering comes to me. And all of you know there is also the story of in Almora. There's again a beautiful center there of Lord Krishna. And there the devotee, what's his name? Krishna Prem, Sri Krishna Prem. Sri Krishna Prem and Dilip Kumar Roy were great friends. So Sri Krishna Prem would write letters to Dilip Kumar Roy, and Dilip Kumar would show them to Aurobindo, get his answer and send it back. So Dilip Kumar was the bridge between Sri Krishna Prem and Sri Aurobindo. I've seen that ashram, and beautiful place, a very lovely temple. And Sri Krishna Prem used to, as is done in our Indian temples, we put God to sleep and maybe sing a lullaby and then say, have a good night's sleep and good, what do you say in English? Good dreams or sweet dreams. Whatever. He wished them, Radha and Krishna both were there, he put them to bed, closed the temple doors. And that was the practice every day, he used to do that. One morning when he opened the temple doors, he was shocked and surprised to see the anklets of Radha and Krishna were exchanged. Both of them had anklets, but Radha's anklets was on Krishna and Sri Krishna's anklets were on Radha's. So he was so surprised that there are such living people. I mean, it's not, of course he believed it, but for us we think only the statues are laid down and then you make them stand in the morning, give a little bath and put a flower. But then he was so surprised, he wrote to Dilip, and Dilip Kumar Roy, as usual, wrote to Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo says, yes, it did happen. It's not a vision, it's not imagination. So that means they are so alive. You see, Radha and Krishna, they exchanged rings, they exchanged anklets. Maybe they said, give me my anklet and give me your anklet. So it's only to say that they are here, not in mythology, not in those things. So what Sri Krishna says, it will be stupid to say verbatim true, because that is the truth. If only we could realize, if only we could accept, if only we could practice. But alas, the modern generation, it hardly believes in that. If I tell them, they would say you're telling cock and bull stories. But that is the tragedy of the modern generation, that it has gone so much away from our own Indian culture. Speaking to them about our own culture is an alien thing. If I tell them about American stories and all the great singers there, they think they are greatly real. Michael Jackson, yes, great reality, and then all the film heroes and everybody. But if I tell them this Krishna story, they will say, well, Anand Bhai, thank you for the good story, but that's it. But whereas this is the living truth and tradition of our country. There may be few who practice that, but that is the practice we need to do. So what Sri Krishna is telling us, Sri Aurobindo is telling us, or Sri Krishna tells us that all this is really true. Whoever the recipient for the Supreme who transcends the universe is yet here too, however veiled, in us and in the world and in its happenings. He is there as the omniscient witness and receiver of all our works and the secret master. So that is the beauty. That is not just up in heavens and then there is no bridge going up there. Christians may be finding it very hard to go to God because where is the bridge? I mean, is it heaven? I don't know how far it is, how many kilometers or miles. So there is no bridge there. But Indians have been very clear, Hindus, we didn't believe in the bridge. We put the damn God inside, so there is no question of bridge at all. So it's much easier to go within than to reach those heavens. So for us, heaven is here, hell is here, body is here, everything is here. So here it says, the Supreme is here. in everything, who receives and accepts it. He transcends the universe and is yet here too. However veiled in us, all our actions, remember this, all our actions, all our efforts, even our sins and stumblings and sufferings and struggles are obscurely or consciously known to us and seen or else unknown and in a disguise, governed in their last result by the One. And remember, this is Aurobindo writing. Aurobindo writing means out of his experience. It's not a commentary on the Gita. It's a re-experiencing what Lord has said. And as all of you know, he experienced the Gita when he was in Talipur jail. It's not a book that he read called the Bhagavad Gita. So what he's writing is verbatim truth of his own experience. So he says, all our efforts, I mean, imagine the concreteness of this experience. All our actions, all our efforts, even our sins. You see how much we feel that no, I've been a sinner, God has rejected me out of heaven, so how can I go back? Nothing. I mean, it's not that he's trying to encourage immorality or sins, but only giving us a great hope that do not denounce yourself because you have done something wrong. Even our sins and stumblings and sufferings. I mean, so you can see you're totally in the embrace of the divine. Totally. So you may fall, you may suffer, you may go forward, you may go backward, you may forget him, you may not forget him. He says, doesn't matter. He says, and struggles are obscurely or consciously known to us as seen or else unknown and in a disguise. Sometimes I am aware of my problems, sometimes I am not aware. If I have a pain, I don't know the cause. If I have a suffering, I don't know the problem. There's everything, sins, stumblings, sufferings, known to you, unknown to you. He says, governed in their last result by the Supreme One. So that is the truth of this yoga. Mother and Aurobindo are constantly telling us only this, that the divine is so close, if only we could open our eyes. All is turned towards him in his numberless forms and offered through them the single omnipresence. In whatever form and with whatever spirit we approach him, in that form and with that spirit he receives the sacrifice. A magnificent truth again. In whatever form and whatever spirit we approach him, in that form and with that spirit he receives them. Why does a Christian have visions and dreams of Christ and not of Sri Rama? Because a Christian believes in Christ to be the divine. So if a Christian had a dream of Rama, he or she would not be happy. He wouldn't even recognize what Rama is. He says, yes, in the picture I've seen something like that, but he wouldn't consider that as the divine. Or if a Hindu saw the picture of Christ in his dream, he says, I don't know, there's somebody with a white beard who came out, I don't know who he is. It will not give him the joy. So for a Hindu, because the Hindu has visioned God as this Krishna, as this Rama, so the divine comes to a Christian as Christ, comes to a Hindu as Krishna, as comes to a Tamil person in Kuchukupam as Sanganyama. So he says, in whatever form you want me to come, I'll come. Why does he come in whatever form that you want him to? So that your heart sinks in joy and catches his feet. If there were some other person who came in my dreams, I won't have that kind of a joie, that kind of a joy, that kind of a, elan, that leap. So God says, in whatever way we approach Him, in that form and with that spirit, He receives the sacrifice. So you sacrifice to Ganesh ji, you sacrifice to this God. Says what is important is the sacrifice. To whom are you giving? To Ganesh or to Christ or to Krishna or to Rama or to Sri Aurobindo or to Mutalama? Matters not. But what is important is the act of giving, the act of surrender. So this act is important. To whom you give, in what name you give, it doesn't matter. So that is the recipient. Recipient is the divine in whatever form you want. So let us not say, oh, I give to Sri Aurobindo, she gives to Ganeshji, and that person gives to Mutalama, so I am great. No way. The person tomorrow, on 25th, they are going to sacrifice, they are going to surrender, they are going to do a puja, they are going to do all that to those 100 deities. But there is a great joy, there is a great veneration of giving to that God. Fine. But there are things there that we need to discuss later. Now, this is the question that we have discussed, who is the recipient? Now, the fourth one that I want to see today is what is the fruit of sacrifice? You have given to the divine that you have chosen, the name, form you have chosen, that is the recipient. Then what is the fruit of your sacrifice? And the fruit also of the sacrifice of works varies according to the work, according to the intention in the work, and according to the spirit that is behind the intention. You see, this is important to understand. As I was telling you, see, these people next week are going to do the sacrifice. Some of us go to this Ganeshji temple, some of us go to Sri Aurobindo ashram, some of us go to Tirupati. We are all doing some act of surrender, sacrifice, gesture of giving. But what would be the result? Would the result be same in all the four places? That's very important. It's not the question of you have gone here or there or here. But you see, in recent times, many people have made Sri Aurobindo Samadhi as something like Tirupati place. Like we go to Tirupati, put our offering, put our letters, put our this thing, people come to Samadhi and put their letters on Samadhi and say, I want my daughter to be married in next month. I want a job to come. So everything they are putting down on the Samadhi and praying. So now what's happening? You are doing exactly the same thing that you would be doing at Tirupati, you are doing it at the Samadhi. The place is different. Now what is happening here? This is the fruit of your sacrifice or surrender will differ according to the intention, according to the spirit behind the intention. What is it that you want? Are you coming to Sri Aurobindo Samadhi to get your girl married? Or are you coming to Sri Aurobindo Samadhi to have a psychic realization? What is your intention? But all other sacrifices are partial, egoistic, mixed, temporal, incomplete. Even those offered to the highest powers and principles keep this character. The result too is partial, limited, temporal, mixed in its action, effective only for a minor or intermediate purpose. You see? Now this is very important for us for on a day-to-day practice level. What should we do and why should we do? He says you may have all kinds of sacrifice. Sacrifice means surrendering. You may go to this God, that God, this God. But the results also would be in consonance with the intention, your intensity. You see, it just don't think that if you are going to Sri Aurobindo Samadhi and say that I want my job, next job to be done, and then you expect that Sri Aurobindo would fulfill because you are a kind of an ashramite or an Aurobindonian or something. The result also would be partial. He says even the word is uses the word temporal, limited, mixed. Because your own intention has been mixed, your effort is partial, your prayers are limited. So it is exactly, you scoop out from the divine as much as your hands are big. If you have gone with a limited thing, you get from the divine only this much. If you have gone to the divine with a great wide consciousness, you get back a huge width of his gift. So if I am asking the divine only for a little thing, you get a small thing. So why is it that we have to really have an intensity? Because if we think writing a letter to Sri Aurobindo and the mother is, you are going to be granted. And on the contrary, the mother's blessings are, she says, not for your the welfare of your material things. You go to Mother Sri Aurobindo not for marriage of your daughter or for your jobs, but for an inner spiritual growth. There are all the Tirupatis in the world and all the Changani Amals around to fulfill your daughter's marriage, your next job, your passing of the examination, to give to your house, to get your property. But Mother Sri Aurobindo are here, not necessarily, they may give you as a bonus. But the real thing that we need to ask from them is the inner psychic contact. That is their mission, to bind us with their golden chain. So if we can pray, Mother, bind me with your golden chain so that I don't ever go away from you. Nolida explains in a beautiful manner, he says, there are two kinds of chains with Mother. One is the golden chain, the other is the iron chain. The golden chain is the one that really ties up our soul for all lives together. So if we have once turned to the Mother and say, Mother, I seek thee, I love thee and nothing else and no one else. So we are putting that lasso of our love on our soul. That is the golden chain. So that is there for all eternity. But once we have to put on the lasso ourselves and say, Ma, I am here for thee. But then there is a golden chain, but there is also the iron chain. It's just the iron chain is the one that is tied with the body, with the physical. That keeps you in the proximity of the Mother. Of course, he spoke about this when the Mother was there in her physical. He says, all of us have also got an iron chain. So physically we are moving with the Mother. I mean, wherever we go, in Bombay we see a Sri Aurobindo Center, if we go to Singapore we go to Sri Aurobindo Center. We want to physically move in the vicinity of the Mother. That is the iron chain. But spiritually the golden chain is there, which is tied with us. As the Mother herself says, I am responsible. Once you call me and surrender to me, I am responsible for you not only for this life but for all lives to come. That is the golden chain. So in every life is the Mother who will take charge of your spiritual growth. It's not the question that you will be the richest man or you will be the best man, no. It's of your spiritual growth. So he would tell us here, the one entirely acceptable sacrifice is the last and highest and uttermost self-giving. It is that surrender made face to face with devotion and knowledge, freely and without any reserve to one who is at once our immanent self, the environing constituent all, the supreme reality, beyond this or any manifestation, and secretly all this together concealed everywhere, the immanent transcendence. For to the soul that wholly gives itself to Him, God also gives Himself altogether. Only the one who offers his whole nature finds the self. Only the one who can give everything enjoys the divine all everywhere. Only a supreme self-abandonment attains to the supreme. Only the sublimation by sacrifice of all that we are, can enable us to embody the highest and live here in the immanent consciousness of the transcendent spirit. So what is it that he is asking us? You may ask for temporary things, material things, material success, vital things. You will get only these little tidbits, as we say, breadcrumbs. God will give you the breadcrumbs if that satisfies you. But then he says, the beautiful thing is, for to the soul that wholly gives itself to him, God also gives himself altogether. You see, the more integrally you give to yourself to the divine, he gives himself integrally to you. You have this famous example of Arjuna and Duryodhana in the Mahabharata story. What did they ask? When both of them went, and when Sri Krishna was sleeping, they went and sat near his bed. And when Sri Krishna wakes up from his afternoon nap, he was also sleeping in the afternoon. That's why we also sleep in the ashram. So we have taken his habit, so don't blame us. So you are sleeping, and then these two people go and sit there, and when he wakes up, he says, Duryodhana, so what is it that you want? Why have you come? I mean, quite a strange and unexpected visitor like Duryodhana coming to Sri Krishna. Duryodhana says, sir, there's a Kurukshetra war that is coming up. Maybe you know that. Sri Krishna says, yes, I know that. And maybe he said on the side saying, it is I who have created the whole Kurukshetra war. Don't bother. It's my doing. Because the origin, the creator of Kurukshetra war is Sri Krishna himself, not Pandavas and Kauravas. He is the fellow who did the mischief. So he says, yes, what do you want? I think I know, somebody told me about it came on the media that there is going to be a war. What is it that you want? He says, in this great war I hear that you have a great army, I want your army. He says, such a big army you want? He says, yes, that's the best thing you have, you can give me. But I came first before Arjuna, so my demand is first. So Krishna says, then what do I do? You are the first one to demand that, I'll give you my army. And when it's the turn of Arjuna, he says, what is it left of me now? He has taken the army, what is it that you want? He said, Lord, I want only you, not your army. So one who wants the Lord gives himself fully. To Duryodhana, he gave his army, the breadcrumbs, hardly anything. But Arjuna wanted the Lord. So who wins the war? The one who has the Lord on his side. So he says, I want you, and he gets. Only the one who offers his whole nature finds the self. So you give him integrally, totally. The more you give, the more you receive. So coming to Mother and Aurobindo, why do you want just a little breadcrumb of an examination, sending my child to Paris and sending my son to... He may give you because you have been a faithful fellow last 45 years you have been here. थोड़ा तो तुम्हारे पर कृपा रहता है भगवान का. But we have lost a chance. This little bidding, you could have gone to Ganesh temple, there is right next door to ashram, and that man's visa is just that much. Ganeshji gives you little breadcrumbs. His power is that much. But here is an ocean, a supramental person who gives you a supramental gift, who gives you the gift of your psychic being. That's what is the mother's work. To give us gifts of our own psychic being. And what a chance we'll lose when we say, I want to get a job, I want to get my son married. It's just foolishness to ask Father Aurobindo for the little breadcrumbs. Ask them the immense thing and he will give you, because he alone can give you. So he says, one who gives himself fully, he gives himself to him. Only the one who can give everything enjoys the divine all everywhere. This is a magnificent sentence because this has been a perfect description of the life of Mother and Aurobindo. You read the Mother's prayers and meditations. You read Aurobindo's sonnets. I mean, I mean, this sentence is verbatim practiced by them. Every time giving to the divine, every time giving himself. There's a beautiful poem by Aurobindo on surrender, where he really says, take my mind, take my body, take my heart, everything to be thy channel, to be thy instrument. In the end, he adds a little line. He gives everything, but then he says, keep only my soul, so that it may adore thee eternally. Brilliant. He says, you take everything from me, but keep my soul. Because what is it, the soul? So that it may adore thee eternally. Beautiful. So I want to adore you eternally with my soul. Rest of the body, life and mind, you take, use it as you want. I have no use for it. So there are beautiful poems like that where you see Aurobindo and the mother giving up themselves to be their channel. Only a supreme self-abandonment attains to the supreme. Only the sublimation by sacrifice of all that we are can enable us to embody the highest. So if we really give ourselves up fully, then He will use us. As long as you hold on to yourself, Lord will not come. You have the famous example which I have told some of my students before, the example of Draupadi in that famous scene in that hall when her sari was being pulled away. She calls to Lord Krishna to help her, and Lord Krishna doesn't come. For a long time he doesn't come to help her. Then one of his 1600 people, or one of the two wives there, says, hey Krishna, we are being called by Draupadi, she is your sister, no, why don't you go and help her? He says, no. Because she is still holding the sari by her own hands and then calling me. He says, until she holds the sari herself, she thinks that she will be able to save herself, or her 5 husbands will save her. Let her try. In the end, Draupadi leaves both the hands and says, Lord, come. And instantly Lord comes. So that is the thing. When you abandon yourself fully, when you are fully given to Him, then He has to come. Not He comes, He has to come. Because you have given yourself fully to Him. So, this is the meaning of surrender and sacrifice. Well, we'll take up, I could have taken up for another hour, but I know there's a dining room bell, somebody's feeling hungry. But for me, this is the Krishna Katha, Ram Katha, Aurobindo's Katha. To read him is a joy for me. I mean, I get immersed. But time weighs heavy on us, but we will meet, and don't keep any target. If you have the synthesis, do bring with you this volume, because I'm going to skip from page to page. But before, I thought I'd take up only the 6th chapter, but then I said I would be missing so much of sacrifice, and so this is one theme that we will take up. Till 24th I have written 18, 19, 20, then 21st darshan, 22nd, 23rd, 24th. But if you have some more patience, we'll go. Because I don't want to finish, finishing Aurobindo you cannot. Every word you halt, every word you really drink him. We just, flutter out. So let's drink deep, or drink not the Parian spring. And I'm a student of literature, that's what it is. So, as per the program, we are here till 24th. But if some of you stay back, some of you choose to stay back, we'll continue and see wherever we finish. That's why I'm going slow, because मजा आता ना चूसने में, खाने में क्या आता है you have to really bite it and really, okay? Let's have the concentration before.